What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Huddle. It is April the 24th, and Tony, just a day away from the NFL draft. How you doing today, my friend?
I'm excited. I've been getting a little less sleep lately with preparing with my mock drafts, but yeah, I can't wait for the NFL draft. And then obviously, like we've been talking about last couple weeks, NBA and NHL playoffs. Andrew, I do got a little bit to get off my chest this morning, though. Not sports related. It's just a pet peeve that I get a little annoyed with, and I'm looking for some validation, but tell me if this doesn't annoy you.
Does it involve picking up televisions off the side of the road? Because I don't want to hear it anymore.
It does not involve that personal habit of mine. Okay. If I'm in a place, seriously, whether it's a hardware store and I'm asking for help or I'm calling on the phone, I get really annoyed when I don't get confidence on the other end. Like if I'm in a hardware store and I'm like, hey, where are the hammers, for instance? And they're like, I think it's aisle 26. I'm like, you work here. What do you mean you think? Or this is an actual one that actually happened to me. I had a family member in town and there was a wild boar sandwich at this particular restaurant, but it was a special. I didn't know if they still had it. So I called up and I wanted to know if they still had the sandwich. Hey, do you still have this in the menu? Yeah, I think so. And I show up that day and it's not on the menu. Like, I called with uncertainty. I want some confidence from the employee that works there. Drives me nuts.
Okay, I've got two follow-ups. Number one, what hardware store are you going to that they can't direct you to the hammer section? Like, I feel like that's already a tough one. But then, like, you're eating wild boar? Who are you? You're a guy, you're talking about going to the sports book in Las Vegas with, like, almond butter and celery stalks, and now you're like calling restaurants for wild boar sandwiches? I don't know who you are anymore, man. Like this is an evolution I didn't see coming.
You know, I've really let myself go ever since the Islanders have disappointed me the last couple days. So the wild boar was the wild boar was for a friend, but it just drives me nuts because I'm looking for some conviction. As a handicapper, I feel bad. Like if we do a show and you're like, hey Tony, do you have any picks? I'll be honest and say, I don't have a lot of conviction on these picks, and I actually feel bad about it. So as a customer service person, I don't see any guilt. These people are just kind of like, I think it's over there. I'm going to go back to my phone. I'm just like, come on. It drives me insane.
Yeah, that's the tough one. As an ambassador of a store or of a brand, you need to feel that conviction. You need to be like, yes, sir, the hammers are down this way, or whatever the case may be. I agree.
Let me walk you there. What happened to that?
What's that?
Remember when people used to walk you places in stores?
I don't know what it's like in the States, like in Texas where you are, but here we still have that. We still hang our hats on that gold standard of customer service. So, but I hear you.
Wow.
I appreciate that you brought that up today. I'm on your side with this one. Steve really going hard on the sound effects today. Sound effects budget done for the episode. We're gonna talk obviously NFL draft today. We did a bit of a playoff preview last week, and we broke down a few things to pay attention to. So I specifically talked about some NBA things people should focus on and to look for in the postseason. One thing I did mention, Tony, was the fact that you'll probably see an uptick in defense, an uptick in intensity on the floor, which could lead to some low shooting percentages and in turn some unders. And we've seen that through 4 days so far. Unders have gone 10-4 through 14 games so far in the NBA. Favorites in the NBA have gone 8-6 against the spread. They did go 4-0 against the spread on that opening day on Saturday, so just 4-6 ATS in 10 games since. The Indiana Pacers still -110 with that series now going back to Indiana. So I think a teeny tiny bit of value still left there in that one, but really not much else in series markets in the NBA. Tony, you've been deep into the NHL, which I think has been pretty good so far. What are series price markets looking like over there? And do you think, Tony, that there is a chance that any of the teams down 0-2 can come back like Tampa Bay or like the aforementioned New York Islanders?
So the Islanders are now 9-1, and I can't bet it because I've already got 2 bets on them. I bet them when they were down 1-0 at 5-1 as well. So I can't do it, but there is good value there. I don't want to be that guy that's like, I'm not going to bet it with my money, but you should. But I'm just saying, down 2-0. And the reason I do think there's a little bit of value there is because these two teams played twice during the regular season. They split that series. 2 of the games went to overtime. And these 2 losses for the Islanders, they were right in it. I'm just going to sound like a whiny baby right now, but they were right in it in the third period. They were either tied or leading, and they let those games slip away. So while on paper, the Islanders are definitely the inferior team, when they play, when they match up, it's really close matchups that we're seeing. So that 9-1 price is intriguing, but I can't personally do it at this point. The Capitals at 13-1 doesn't do much for me. The Lightning has 6-1. That's pretty juicy. I'm not going to do it, though. I do like that Jets. I know they're not down 2-0, but tied 1-1. Jets plus 140. I think that is still intriguing because I think they can pull this series out. I could see that one going to 7 games. But Islanders are plus 180 to win the Stanley Cup right now. 181, excuse me, not plus 180. So just throw that one out there too.
You tried to pitch them as the official team of the Huddle for the NHL playoffs. I quickly kiboshed that one, so I'll pat myself on the back there. You're right, though, to a degree. Like, the Isles have been in both of those games, but that game, too, the way that they lost that, the fashion in which they choked that away, that's got to be the death blow for the Islanders. That would be so disheartening for a team to be up in that fashion and then let it slip away. I do want to get into our segment here, though, Tony. We had our boy Ryan Hoag on yesterday, Mr. Irrelevant in the 2003 NFL Draft. He was drafted by the Raiders. He also spent time with the Vikings. Also was on one of the early seasons of The Bachelor. We sat down with him to talk about what it's like for a player to be thinking about the draft and the toll it can take on you physically and emotionally. And of course, we talk about a ton of bets to keep your eyes on as well. So let's get into it. Why don't we roll that clip? With us today is our very own Mr. Irrelevant, Ryan Hoag, last pick of the 2003 NFL Draft. Ryan, how are you doing today?
Man, that feels like a long time ago, but I'm feeling great. This is the best time of year. I'm excited.
Do you remember, I mean, I'm sure the answer is yes, but do you remember who the first pick was in your draft?
Yes, it was the Heisman Trophy winner, Carson Palmer, was the first pick. And I remember that so well because it was the first time in history the first pick was the Heisman, and then we had me, the last pick, as the Lozman, and so we did a joint banquet during Irrelevant Week, the Heisman and Lozman winner, so I got to hang out with Carson.
Do you remember, I don't want to dwell on 03, but there was a wide receiver picked just a handful of spots before you in that 7th round who turned out to be a pretty good, serviceable wide receiver. Do you remember who that was?
Well, I think I was maybe the 36th receiver or so picked. I know in the 7th round, Taco Wallace was drafted, which you never forget a guy whose first name is Taco. Boy, I tell you, I mean, I look back to that draft. I don't remember specifically who was right before me, but I mean, it's similar in terms of like the talent we had back then. You had Andre Johnson, Charles Rogers, you had Anquan Bolden, Nate Burleson, you had Brandon Lloyd. I know that's one of Tony's favorite guys. Bryant Johnson out of Penn State was a first rounder. Like, we had some studs in that draft.
It had a nice little career with the Texans. Kevin Walter.
Yep.
Kevin Walter, you know, a couple of good, like 899 yards, 60 catches, 800 yards, 65 catches, a good little career. I just found that an interesting little tidbit. But first and foremost, talk to me about what your draft experience was like. You were, like we said, drafted in 03. You did the NFL Combine. You did pro days. So talk to me about that whole process from a player's perspective. Both the stress physically, but then mentally leading up to draft day.
Sure. So what most draft eligible players will do is once their football season's done and the bowl season is done, they'll go to some sort of trainer that their agent prescribes. And I went down to New Orleans and worked with Tom Shaw, who was like the speed guru. He was Deion Sanders' former track coach at Florida State, former strength and conditioning coach for the New England Patriots. And I just wanted to continue to hone my, 40-yard dash time, because that's kind of what put me on the map. So I wanted to do that and then get in front of guys, the nice thing about that was you're able to be down there with other draft eligible players. So you're running one-on-ones against, top 10 cornerbacks. You're seeing what the other wide receivers, Brian Johnson, who was a first round draft pick, was down there with me. You're getting quarterbacks that are going to be in the, picked, throwing the ball to you. And he creates a really competitive atmosphere. I did that because as a Division III guy, I didn't know if I was going to get to the NFL Combine. I didn't know if I was going to get invited to the Senior Bowl. So those were kind of the two things I was hoping to do. I ended up being the first ever Division III player to be invited to the Combine, so that was cool. So I got that opportunity. I didn't get to do this Senior Bowl, so they didn't really get to see me with pads against, these top rated players, which was disappointing. But and then I did a couple pro days. I reached out to the University of Minnesota and asked if I could join their pro day, which is commonplace with a lot of big schools that, they just want, talent around them. Minnesota didn't allow me to participate. I don't know if it was something where they didn't want me to show their guys up because they didn't really have any draft eligible, position players, or wide receivers specifically. But, I've always carried that chip on my shoulder that was a disappointment. But then I had 2 pro days, and, all those things are really, really taxing because you don't know who's showing up. You know that you have like one opportunity to leave a first impression. And, you understand that one bad 40-yard dash or Wonderlic score or vertical jump or one injury, pulled hamstring away from being off of everybody's radar. So it is really, really frustrating and very taxing.
What did it feel like to get that phone call, though, that you were indeed going to be selected by an NFL franchise?
Yeah, so leading up to the draft, like the week of, we're a couple days right before the draft, and I remember fielding calls left and right from scouts to position coaches. I remember James Lofton, who was the Chargers receiver coach at the time, had a long conversation with me, and they're all trying to build relationships with you and try to get a feel for what you're hearing in terms of from other teams, because they want to make sure that they have you slotted in the position that they think you're going to go. And if another team's really in love with you, they want to know that because they want to communicate that to their upper management. And hey, this is a guy we targeted in the 6th round. Looks like Dallas might take him in the 4th round. Should we, pull the trigger a little earlier? And all it takes is one coach to fall in love with you to get drafted. The frustrating thing with that is with all the mock drafts and it is exponentially bigger now, but even back then, you're hearing things from, I'm going to get drafted in the 3rd round, to the Cowboys, watch out for them, they have a pick in the 4th round. And then once draft day comes, you're fielding those calls as well. Hey, this is so-and-so from the Green Bay Packers. We have 2 picks coming up. We're picking a receiver. Get ready to be a Packer. The Dallas Cowboys called me in the 4th round saying, hey, we got a pick coming up. We're drafting a receiver. You're our guy. And then the pick comes, you don't get drafted, and you're like, and a lot of times this is, again, that cat and mouse game, because they want to be able, if you do fall through the draft, to be able to say, hey, you were my guy. I don't know what happened, but we wanted you in the 4th round. Can we have you as an undrafted free agent?
So, as you've mentioned, you were drafted at that wide receiver position, and that is this year certainly one of the hottest positions in the draft. And there are 3 dudes, obviously, that are the big names this year: Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Nabors, Odunze. So break those 3 down a little bit and tell me which of these guys looks like he's going to be the best, in your opinion.
Yeah, so you can't go wrong, I don't think, with any of them. And I think you're going to see teams really trade up to get their hands on any of those 3. I think the only knock against Marvin Harrison Jr. is if his name wasn't Marvin Harrison, would he still be, considered a top 3 prospect? And I think hands down he would. I mean, you're looking at 6'3", 6'4", 205, probably the most polished route runner of the group. He, to me, is a surefire Pro Bowler as a rookie. and that is a hard position to become a Pro Bowler. I think he has all the makeup, and he showed it as, even his freshman year when he was surrounded by so many other great receivers. He still found catches and touchdowns as a freshman at Ohio State. Then I'm looking at Rome Odunze, when another big guy, 6'3", 215, when you're talking about contested catches, right? NFL, the windows are so much smaller than college. You got to make contested catches. That guy can go up and make a play for you. I know you've been following him as a Pac-12 enthusiast all year, and he was unbelievable this year, and I think his game's gonna translate. And then Malik Nabors is one of those guys, a little smaller, 6 foot, 200, but he's the king of yak, right? Yards after catch. He's probably the most explosive of the three. The question is, can he beat press coverage? But I think the Miami Dolphins this year unlocked that new kind of jet motion that frees up guys to not have to worry so much about beating press coverage, and they've done it with both Tyreek and Jalen Waddle. So I don't foresee that being a problem. But for me, I always predicate who's going to be the best by their quarterback, right? And I look at Odunze had Michael Penix, who I think is the most underrated quarterback in this draft, and obviously, was right up there for the Heisman. He had a phenomenal quarterback. Obviously, Malik Nabors with Daniels, Heisman Trophy winner. Then I look at Marvin Harrison Jr. And last year, C.J. Stroud, right, unbelievable stud, put up great numbers. This year, 1,200 yards, 14 touchdowns. Does anybody even remember who Ohio State's quarterback was? I mean, he transferred already out, right? I mean, it wasn't a stud, it wasn't a dude, but he still put up numbers, and being the focal point in that offense, Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be that guy. And I think, if you pass on him, I understand that quarterbacks go early and justifiably so, but he should be the first player, non-quarterback, off the board, and it's not even close.
Ryan, good point on the quarterbacks being married to these wide receivers. I understand that you're high on Penix. I don't think Ninja is high on Penix, if I understand correctly. Are people's opinions of Odunze connected to Penix? Because if you believe that Penix is overrated, don't you then have to say Odunze is better and he made Penix look good with some of those contested catches and things like that? I don't know if either of you have an opinion on those two players married together.
You can take it, Ryan, but my trepidation with Penix on Sundays is just that his throwing mechanics are a bit wonky. I don't know that that's going to translate to the pro game. We've seen him banged up all season, and a lot of those times Odunze and those other really good Washington wideouts had to go and make plays on a lot of those big-time, memorable plays that Penix made. I don't know that Penix translates to Sunday, and I'm going to ask you a Penix question here in a bit, but you can go ahead and field that as to Tony's point there in regards to Penix.
So, I had the opportunity to play with a lot of great receivers, a lot of great quarterbacks, and although I didn't play with Brett Favre, I was with the Vikings right before he was. The great quarterbacks in the NFL in particular can make guys a lot of money. I look at Sidney Rice for the Vikings. Sidney Rice was a fine receiver, maybe like a great number 2 receiver. Once he played one season with Brett Favre made that guy tens of millions of dollars because he had a Pro Bowl season, because he was his number 1 guy, and he just trusted him. The difference between the first guy cut in NFL training camp and a Pro Bowl receiver is so small. With the exception of the Randy Mosses of the world, they're just, all these guys are really good. It just takes one quarterback to believe in them. Despite that, I will say that Penix, right, his game translates to the NFL because intermediate and deep passes, he is the number 1 quarterback in this draft. Greg Cosell, who's worked for has done NFL films for the last 40 years, right? Somebody I respect. I met him at Broadcast Boot Camp years ago. He is high on Penix and has stated that, in terms of like intermediate and deep passes, which the NFL has gone to, and really has fallen in love with, right? And how hard is it as a DB now to tackle anybody or to not interfere with anybody. Like, those are the types of throws that you need to be confident making. And Penix does it week in and week out. Yeah, he has his injury, right? And in Indiana, he was unbelievable and had a couple injuries. But I don't know. I'm high on Penix, and I actually think he's going to sneak into the top 10. And the Raiders are going to trade into the top 10 to take him.
Wow, that would be very interesting for sure.
That would be insane. So you've already answered the question, so we can skip over it coming up here momentarily. But I want to stick with wide receivers, and maybe I'll start with you, Tony. But there's over 6.5 wide receivers in the first round. Is around 2-1. Is this a bet worth making? And maybe, Ryan, this one is more for you. Who are the other wide receivers other than the other 3 that we just mentioned that could go in the first round, or the other 4 that could cash that bet? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Tony.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about this bet in particular in the sports media spaces. And honestly, I've seen a lot of really good, solid arguments for both sides here. For the over 6.5 and the under 6.5. It's not one that I've bet. Kind of the breakdown is, we all know Harrison, Nabors, and Odunze are the top 3. No doubt about it. I mean, these guys are top 10 talents. They're going to get drafted early. Brian Thomas, and then Worthy and Mitchell, the 2 receivers from Texas. We think they're probably going to go in the first round as well. So there's your 6. And then there's a whole host of guys. You know, Coleman from Florida State, McConkey from Georgia, Corley from Western Kentucky, Franklin from Oregon, and others that you could make an argument for that sneak in there. I'm not going to bet this, just knowing that, like, kind of like we talk about how the public likes to bet overs. I think in a draft like this, the public is going to like to bet wide receivers and not so much offensive linemen. And there's also a ton of offensive linemen in this draft. So if anything, I'm thinking over on the offensive linemen, under on the wide receivers, but I don't have enough conviction to bet it. There's just so much uncertainty, like, when you get that late in the draft. It is worth noting, 49ers and Chiefs, last 2 teams to pick in the first round. You could make an argument for wide receiver at both those 2 positions, especially if the 49ers don't keep Ayuk. We know the Chiefs are going to be very wide receiver hungry in this draft. So it could be a situation where that bet is decided on those last 2 picks in the rounds.
I'm not ready for any Brandon Ayuk talk, so I'll leave that one right there. But that's a really good point, Tony, at the end of that opening round with those 2 teams. Certainly in need potentially of wide receivers. McConkey's a good call out there, Tony. He's a dude that earlier on, maybe it was Combine or Pro Day, he was sort of getting a lot of hype on social media. Ryan, over to you. Do you think over 6.5 plus 200 a good bet for wide receivers in the opening round?
I'm betting under on the 6.5, and here's why. Like we've talked about, the top 3 are studs, and then the difference between a Mitchell and a Thomas and a McConkey, there's not a lot of difference. So I don't see a lot of reason for teams to trade into the first round to get any of those guys. If they can't get those top 3, I think they're going to be fine waiting till that second round and getting one of those guys, because it's 6 and 1, half dozen the other. I do really like Ladd McConkey. I think his game's going to translate. I think his numbers are vastly underrated. I also like a guy, Ricky Purcell, out of Florida. He's a Amon-Ra St. Brown type when he was coming out of USC. I think, wasn't he a 4th or 5th round draft pick out of USC? And Ricky Purcell's game, route runner in the middle of the field, really, really translates well to the NFL. Look for him as a sleeper to be a NFL starter someday.
Another interesting betting market with value is first defensive player to be selected. Dallas Turner plus 105, Latu out of UCLA plus 250, Byron Murphy out of Texas 3-1, and so on down the list. Thoughts on first defensive player to be chosen? I'll start with you, Ryan.
Yeah, it's interesting because in the last 10 years, there have been 2 positions drafted first on the defensive side of the ball. Do you guys know what they are?
Corner.
Say the question again.
So in the last 10 years, there have only been 2 positions drafted as the first defensive pick, right? Corner is one. What's the other one?
Edge.
Defensive end.
Well, defensive end, right? And I think that's fascinating that seems to always show up. And I think in this day and age, if you can get a stud corner, right? I think that's why corners oftentimes, now I would argue that there's really nobody that looks like a top 10 or 12 pick as a corner in this draft. But I think it's going to be an edge, right? And also in the Jadeveon Clowney is the only number 1 draft pick, right, on the defensive line who failed to record a sack as a rookie. I think that's a fascinating stat as I was looking into this. So I'm looking at, I'm a big fan of Latu from UCLA. I think he should be their first defensive player. Whether or not that is in the top 10, I think it probably should be. But, the Alabama guys, especially on the defensive side, as much as I am not a Nick Saban fan, right? Those guys in Alabama always seem to translate to NFL ready because they kind of treat their program like a professional team, right? It's if you don't get the job done, you're gonna, we're not gonna give you superstar treatment. And even if you're a 5-star guy coming in, and I think that's why these defensive guys often translate. So you look at a guy like Dallas Turner that would certainly fit the bill. I'm not as high on, like Quinyon Mitchell is probably the top corner out of Toledo, but again, I don't see him as a top 12 guy. I see him more as like a 13 to 20 type of guy. But if I had to pick one guy, I'm picking Latu. He moves so well for a guy that size, and if you can be disruptive and take that 2008 Giants playbook, defensive playbook, and just get after the quarterback with your front four, you're going to have a lot of success, even if you don't have any studs in the back end.
I got a question for you guys. Going back to the wide receivers real quick. We've talked so much during the season, Ninja, about how the game has changed and unders are hitting more often and the NFL is less scoring and defenses are playing these shell coverages, etc. Going back to our wide receiver question, with the changes in the way that teams are playing defense, does that put more of an emphasis on drafting wide receivers because it's harder to score and you need that elite talent? Or is it with them playing these defenses, it kind of, even if you have a good wide receiver, they're not going to be able to score. You know what I mean? How does that change impact the value of wide receivers going forward, do you guys think?
So before I throw it to Ryan, I'll just say I think wide receiver is a valuable position now just because of what Ryan was referring to, the emphasis on the aerial game now. I'm about to get into talking about the running backs that are on the board, but talk about a position that has fallen off the radar for teams. The running back position is not as sexy to where it once was. And because of the emphasis on the passing game, you need to lock in 4 deep at that wideout position or you're not competing in 2024. I don't know if you share that same thought on Tony's question, Ryan, but that's where I sit on the emphasis and importance of that position.
Yeah, and I would take it one step further and say it's that much more important to have an offensive-minded head coach or at least a really innovative offensive coordinator.
Yes.
And, guys that can, keep it easy for the quarterback by a lot of pre-snap motion, right? You see the Kansas City Chiefs, Miami Dolphins, right? Back when Tom Brady played, any team he was on, you predicate your offensive pre-snap movement to make it easy to figure out what the defense is going to do. So when they're playing that shell, okay, well, if I move my guys to this position, now I got the matchup I'm looking for. I have Julian Edelman on the slot against a walkout linebacker or whatever it might be. And so, yes, having multiple receivers to be able to accomplish those things. And again, it goes down to that cerebral game too. These guys have to be able to not just, be a better athlete like they were in college, right? And that's why Marvin Harrison, his ability to run routes is so important. right? Not just, for me in college, it was, Ryan, you're going to line up here. We're going to line 3 guys up on the other side, and they're going to be either in an uncomfortable position with a numbers game on that side, or they're going to be an uncomfortable one guy guarding you. And if it's one guy guarding you, just run faster than and most of these guys, right, the Mitchells of the world, or any of these Texas receiver, LSU receivers, when you have an elite quarterback, he's just going to give you a chance. And one-on-one, it's impossible for a DB, right? So, but yeah, going back, it's that offensive coordinator being able to, predicate yourself, set yourself up for success by that pre-snap motion, and, not having an old school mentality. Like, you have to be innovative and 21st century type thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Analytics so prevalent across the board in sports currently. Like, you look at the NBA, you look at the average shot chart in the NBA, everything is around the arc or at the rim. The mid game is dead, and it's a perfect segue into the death of the significance of a top running back. First running back selected, another one potentially up in the air here. Jonathan Brooks -125, Trey Benson +275. Jalen Wright 3-1. Blake Corum from Michigan +360. Any opinion on this one, Ryan?
Yeah, first of all, I think the days of first round draft picks for running backs are gone. I really do.
Yeah.
I look at Brooks out of Texas, and the thing that stands out is, he didn't play much the last 2 years, right? I mean, he's had 1 year of success. Now, the positive is he doesn't have a lot of mileage on his body, but the negative is, right, he was, on a really explosive offense running through big holes. Like, I look at, like, if you compare him to Blake Corum, to me, like, Blake Corum is a better running back and is going to suit the NFL game better. However, Blake Corum had hundreds of more carries in the last 2 years. So NFL teams, right, understand that running back probably not going to have a big, make a big difference their rookie year. So then that second, third, fourth, how long are these guys going to last? How many injuries are they going to sustain? Blake Corum's obviously smaller in stature. But gone are the days that's an important position, to your point. And, Brooks kind of looks like a James Cook type out of Buffalo, where he's a guy, but if you plug and play a lot of guys, even guys that are looking for a training camp invite this year, there's a lot of really good running backs that are unemployed right now, and 6 and 1, half dozen the other. There aren't a lot of Derrick Henrys out there, so I wouldn't be surprised if you waited till the 3rd round to see your first running back draft.
How about Trey Benson? You guys got a strong opinion on him? He's like the most fun highlights to watch. I could just put this guy's highlights on. I see, this isn't the best comparison, but I see a little bit of Frank Gore in this guy when he runs. Kind of that bowling ball type mentality, very comfortable with contact. And when I'm looking for running backs that'll translate to the NFL level, that's what I want to see, is those guys who are comfortable with contact, because like Ryan said, some guys out there you put on the highlight tape and they're just running through giant holes. And that's nice if you're good out in space, but I want someone that's not only comfortable with contact, but can get me yards after contact. And I like that kid a lot.
I like Braylon Allen if you're going to talk about like fun to watch and guys that can just, beast people over. Wisconsin, I mean, Big Ten is running football. And there have been social media pictures of showing him next to Derrick Henry, and everybody looks small next to Derrick Henry. But I will say that, like, he looks the part, and I've been following him since his rookie year or freshman year at Wisconsin. I think he was an early entry out of high school, so he was like 17 playing in the Big Ten. And so, again, though, do I wait till the 3rd round, maybe 4th round to draft somebody like that? And then, are you going to be a bell cow? And what does even a bell cow look like anymore in the NFL, right? 1,000 yards is considered like a really, really good season now. And so, or can I have a number 3 receiver that plays in the slot that gets me 80 catches for, 900 yards? Like, that's as as impactful or even more because it does more to the defense.
Tons of quarterback talk, of course, going into the draft. Everyone's talked about the top guys, but I mean, there's an interesting bet out there. I thought we've already heard Ryan's 2 cents on it, so I'll just throw this to you, Tony. Penix or Bo Nix to be drafted first. Penix is minus 260. Bo Nix, who was sort of the guy like maybe 1 month, 2 months ago that was sort of tipped to be drafted first and maybe even thrown in the mix in the top 15 maybe. He's at plus 175. Do you have any thoughts on that? Siding with Nix, Tony, or are you aligned with Ryan there that Penix is going to be comfortably drafted ahead of this guy?
Yeah, I'd say a slight lean toward Nix, not enough to draft it. I view Nix as like the safer bet, and then Penix as the high floor, high ceiling guy. Almost like people, the way people viewed Trey Lance going into that draft. Like this guy could be an absolute stud or totally bottom out, just with those injury concerns with Penix. I mean, that's something that is very real. He had the shoulder injuries and then 2 serious injuries to the same leg, and so that's something that you don't want to be the GM that drafts the guy with injury concerns and he gets injured his rookie year. And it's like, well, told you. You knew that and you decided to overlook it. The interesting thing with Penix, though, is Seattle's offensive coordinator is his former head coach. And Seattle's got to pick 15 or 16 in the middle of that first round. I think that might be a little bit of a reach, but could they potentially trade back? Seattle doesn't have a pick in round 2, so it'd be harder for them to trade up into round 1 to get Penix. But I also think if another team likes Penix, knowing that Seattle is in the market for him might boost his value. In other words, let's say Seattle trades back to 25. Other teams are gonna be like, oh crap, he's good. They're doing it to get Penix. We need to trade into 24, and that could potentially boost his value maybe going forward. But it's just so tough to predict. We can read the tea leaves, but it's tough to predict, and that's why there's just too much uncertainty for me to bet into that market.
Here's another hot take. I think Penix goes before J.J. McCarthy.
Wow.
I think there has been so much talk, right? Harbaugh was my coach, as I've talked about in the past. And, I think he's given all the love in the world to his guy. And I truly believe J.J. McCarthy is a winner. But you know who else we said about that? It was the guy that New England drafted as their quarterback a few years ago. Remember him out of Alabama? He won a lot of games, and his game didn't translate into the NFL. I think Harbaugh's always thinking one step ahead. And I think Harbaugh is targeting Marvin Harrison Jr. and wanting J.J. McCarthy, somebody to, draft or trade up and draft him number 4. So it goes quarterbacks up until his draft pick, right? Playing chess over checkers. But I really don't believe, watching the film, watching all the Michigan games last year that I did, right? There was never a time where I was like, wow, that's one of the top 32 guys in the world at the position, right? He didn't make consistent throws that I would watch. Like, he missed a lot of, he's a above average athlete. Absolutely. He can get out of the pocket, this and that, but as just a pocket quarterback, which I think he would be drafted to be, his game to me doesn't translate to Pro Bowl. Whereas Penix, I feel like you watch him, he made so many splash throws, and yes, he was surrounded with talent. So was Michigan, right? But you would watch him, and you're like, man, he's throwing that 30 yards on a rope. There aren't a lot of guys in the NFL that are making that throw. Or 5-step drop, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-step throw. Michael Penix is making a lot of those throws. McCarthy was handing the ball off a lot or throwing behind the line of scrimmage a lot. And again, that's important in the NFL. I get it, but that seems more game manager, whereas Penix seems like he can open up games. I truly believe that there is no chance Penix lasts till pick number 15. I think somebody, and I feel like the Raiders, I just have a sense that they're going to draft up into the top 10, top 12 and draft Penix.
Tony, I know you've been messing around with mock drafts, so I know we did this last week, but break down your top 10 real quick. Ryan, I want to get your thoughts and then expand on any other chaos that you can see happening within that top 10. What are you looking at as we sit here on Tuesday, Tony?
Yeah, and it has changed slightly since last week. So Caleb Williams first to the Bears, Jaden Daniels second, Patriots Drake May third. Still got Marvin Harrison going fourth to Arizona, Malik Nabors going fifth to the Chargers, Giants Rome Odunze, Titans I've now changed. I've got them getting Joe Alt, the offensive lineman. Raiders I have trading up to get McCarthy, which sounds like Ryan is not buying into. And then Bears ninth, getting Dallas Turner. That's the spot I used to have Alt in. And then I really think the Jets are going to get an offensive lineman here. I don't know if it's going to be Latham or Fuaga. I'm not quite sure which, but they've got to go offensive line, right, guys? Right? Like, that's the move they should make after seeing, what happened to Aaron Rodgers last year. But maybe the Jets are just going to do something silly and get Bowers or I don't know, somebody else on defense. We'll see. But that's my top 10 as it stands right now. Subject to change for sure.
So here are the two places I'm really paying attention to. I'm paying attention to the second pick with the Commanders because I'm not convinced that they're going to pick Daniels. And I'm looking at the 8th pick to the Falcons because I don't know that they're going to be gifted that pick, right? There's a lot of talk that they're going to either have to forfeit the pick because of the Kirk Cousins tampering, or they're going to flip it with the Vikings or something. That's a big deal. That something is absolutely going to happen to the Falcons, and it's going to be pretty significant, especially since this is like kind of uncharted waters. The NFL is going to hammer down on them in like, kind of like they did with Deflategate and Brady and suspending him for 4 games, right? They are going to make an example out of them that, hey, you can't do that. Which, sidebar, I wish the NCAA would do that, because right now you got guys that are committing to their school, getting this booster money or this NIL money, and then another team coming in being like, well, we'll give you $1 million, Kentucky, we'll give you $1 million, and then the kid taking the booster money from the University of Minnesota or wherever, and then leaving to the University of Kentucky, right? There's a problem, and I think the NFL is going to solve that by making Atlanta, or making an example out of Atlanta.
It'd be very interesting. I know there's a lot of smoke around that too, with all that stuff that's been breaking. Tony, give me one or two of the draft bets that you have the most conviction in. I do know you have, a few bits of action out there. Give me one or two that you love, and then Ryan, I'll get a couple off you as well.
Yeah, McCarthy over, meaning worse than 5.5. Ryan and I are on the same page there that we think there's too much hype on McCarthy. I'm not quite as bullish on him dropping as far as Ryan thinks after Penix, but I do think him being in the top 4 or 5 is a little bit inflated. It seems like people are just convinced. It seems like more than 50% of the mock drafts I see, the Vikings are going to trade up into that spot into the top 5 in order to draft him. And I'm just not so convinced on that. How do we know the Vikings don't like Penix or Nix and are willing to, trade back or sit pat where they are and potentially draft them later? And also the Chargers, why are we so sure that they're going to trade that pick? Like, I could see Harbaugh getting an offensive lineman. I could see Harbaugh getting a wide receiver to pair with Herbert, like Ryan mentioned. So I don't think we should just assume that McCarthy is going to be going in the top 5. And if you're going to give me even money on that, I like that one a lot. Another one, how about the Jets getting an offensive lineman plus 110? I know that there's some smoke about them getting a tight end, but like I said, they've got to, after watching Aaron Rodgers get like his season ended very quickly last year, and then whoever they put behind center also got beat up. It's just such a glaring need. Yeah. Give me plus 110 on the Jets to get an offensive lineman. And then 49ers minus 150 on them getting an offensive lineman. So late in the draft, there's going to be a lot of offensive linemen available, and I think that they're willing to spend a first-round pick on someone that fits that zone blocking scheme. So I like that one a lot. And then one more, Graham Barton, under, meaning better than pick 21.5. He's really a good bet to go for the Steelers at pick 20. So I like him going under 21.5. The Steelers are like minus 300 to draft an offensive lineman. It's pretty obvious they're going to draft one somewhere or draft one. It's just a matter of which one. And I think he'd be the one that goes there because he's got some good versatility as a guard and center.
Ryan, any draft day bets that you're in love with?
Absolutely. Quarterback, 4.5. I'm going over. I think for sure 5 quarterbacks at least get drafted in that first round. And the reason to the average person out there, the teams that have success in a quick turnaround, like the Houston Texans, if you can have a quarterback on a rookie contract, that's your starting quarterback. Brock Purdy, right? If you can somehow navigate a first or a rookie contract quarterback, it makes all the difference, right? Or you have to have a very generous, like a Tom Brady who used to take, a sweetheart deal because he was playing for the New England Patriots, right? So they could sign other guys. Most of these guys, they command so much money, the Russell Wilson type contracts, you don't have a lot of room, not a lot of wiggle room, unless you nail every one of your draft picks. You don't have a lot of wiggle room to sign free agents. And even though if the salary cap ballooned this year, there's just so much emphasis on hitting it right as a quarterback to be your starter as a first rounder. Or as a rookie. It's so important. I really like Mims, the offensive tackle. I think over under 22.5. I think he's going to absolutely be drafted in the top 20 because I think he is probably, like, from a gifted standpoint, the best offensive lineman in the draft. Kool-Aid McKinstry, right? If we weren't dealing with, injuries at all, I mean, we would be talking about this guy, I think, in the top 5, top 10, like he was preseason. Tell me the last time an Alabama cornerback didn't have success in the NFL. Like, I don't know one. And all I can think of, like, maybe the best cornerback in the league, right, is playing for the Denver Broncos. Where'd he go? You got Dallas Cowboy cornerback. Like, all these guys, Alabama, they're a factory of really, really good defensive backs in particular. So I'm liking the under 28.5, as in he will be drafted before pick number 28. And running backs is 0.5 first round. I think there's no chance that he gets their running back goes in the first round. There's just no point. So I'm going on the under 0.5 for pick round or first round running backs to be drafted.
What if the Patriots don't take May? What if the Patriots don't take a quarterback there and they want Harrison, or someone else values those wide receivers so much and they're willing to trade up with the Patriots? Because the Patriots have said they're open to a trade. So the 3 spot is where things could get a little crazy on draft day.
What if Tom Brady comes back and plays for the Patriots?
It's true. There's rumors.
Right? What if
People are asking questions.
What if they draft Marvin Harrison Jr. and have Tom Brady come back for one more year? No Belichick there. He was probably happy with that. His former teammate Mayo. Like, why not?
Total offensive players selected in round 1, Ryan, over or under 21?
Yeah, that is a really, really hard one. I think with the emphasis on offenses, I think you're going to go over. It's not going to be by much, of course, because Vegas is always right with their numbers. But I'm going to go slightly over that number.
Yeah, I'd go over too. I've seen a lot of 21.5s out there, so I think you're getting that nice little half player, which could be helpful in this draft. But really offensive heavy draft, guys.
Brock Bowers, Tony, over or under 12.5?
Yeah, I'm going to go over for the reasons I mentioned last week, just the fact that he's a tight end. I wouldn't be shocked if he snuck in there. There's a lot of smoke around the Jets taking him at 10. And I think that would be a big mistake for them. But if he snuck in there, I wouldn't be shocked. I'd still have to say he's not going to be in the top 12, though.
I wouldn't be surprised if Marvin Harrison Jr. is unavailable for the Chargers. Harbaugh taking Bowers. What does Harbaugh like to do? He likes to run the ball and do play action. That's the perfect player to do it. And look at some of the top teams, like the teams that played in the Super Bowl. Maybe the 2 top, and the Lions. I mean, you got 3 of the top tight ends in the league. Like, teams with great tight ends usually end up because that's a mismatch nightmare. And, it's all scripting for success. How can you, as an NFL coordinator, create mismatches? And Brock Bowers is a nightmare of a mismatch. So how about an over-under of how many Michigan players Harbaugh drafts? Is there a number?
That'd be a good one.
Can we find out? There's got to be a bet. There's got to be a prop bet on it.
I'd like to see that market. I'll have to have a look. Adonai Mitchell, Ryan, over or under 27.5?
Yeah, that's a really good number. Again, I spoke about it earlier. I think it's going to be over 27, meaning higher than. I think it might be like one of the first 2 or 3 picks in the second round. But again, these late round, after the top 3 receivers, those guys are all so close that I feel like you're going to be able to get really good value early to mid second round. So why spend a first round draft pick on it?
Yeah, I'd lean over on that one. I do like Ryan's supply and demand argument, making some of these wide receivers fall. That's intriguing.
Chop Robinson, 26.5.
Under.
I'll lean under. What a great name, by the way.
I know. I got back-to-back great
second best
here.
name in this draft, right?
Yeah, behind Kool-Aid McKinstry, Ryan, 28.5. You're pretty high on him, so you're under that?
Absolutely.
Tony?
Yeah, I could see that. He's got the punt return abilities as well. Yeah. I could.
Well,
see
I
him
will
going
say
under.
this. I feel like he should be drafted lower. Now, teams, because of his foot, may shy away, but I do think that that's a plug-and-play guy. Week 1, he's going to be a starter in the NFL, and kind of like people shied away from Joey Porter Jr. last year for whatever reason. He ends up going second round, first pick, or whatever it was. But I could have told you after watching one game of his in college, like, this is going to be a stud. McKinstry's the same. He's going to be a plug-and-play guy day 1.
Last one I'll throw
Hey, Ryan,
here.
real quick,
Sorry,
who was the best corner that you matched up against? Sorry.
Charles Woodson. Charles Woodson and Antoine Winfield are the 2 best corners I ever went against.
Whew, man, oh man. And is this a practice setting, or break it down for me?
So yeah, both teammates of mine. I remember Charles Woodson, like one of my first mini camp routes. I just had a go route, and I was like, oh, I'm going to run faster than this guy. And I took off and just put my head down. I was thinking, I was a 3-time All-American in college. I'm going to just run by this guy. I ran so fast, and this guy is sitting on the top part of my shoulder, jogging, looking back at for the ball. And I was like, this is
Making it look easy.
This guy's, his game speed is out of this world. Antoine Winfield's feet, right? I played the slot a lot once I got to Minnesota and he was there. And his feet, his ability to just, you have a 2-way go when you're in the slot. Whereas when you're outside receiver, oftentimes they know which way you're wanting to release. Slot, you can go whichever is more convenient. It didn't matter. Antoine Winfield's hips were so unbelievable. And he was the best tackler of all the DBs I ever saw.
And then the last one I'll throw at you guys. Speaking of corners, Cooper DeJean, 22.5. Ryan, thoughts on this guy?
Yeah, I've really had a kind of it's a feast or famine with him, right? He's coming off of a pretty bad injury. I liked watching him at Iowa. He obviously was a great punt returner and shutdown corner. A lot of teams might look at him more as a safety in the NFL, and I don't know that he translates to that. So can he play corner at the highest level? He's got great numbers. I think it's going to be over 22.5, meaning closer to the end of the first round. I could see maybe the Chiefs or even the Niners drafting him. The Chiefs definitely need to replace Snead. But he's a guy that I wouldn't be shocked if he's a day 1 starter, but I also wouldn't be shocked if he's a guy that kind of gets buried and maybe as a situational nickel guy.
Yeah, I'll lean under. I think cornerback is just a position of a need, especially for those teams in the top 20. So I'll lean under on this one.
So I've got 2 more questions. One is coming, Ryan. One you don't know is coming. But is there a player sort of flying under the radar leading up to the draft that you think could have a big impact on an NFL team on Sundays that maybe people aren't talking about as much?
Oof. Well, I kind of mentioned Ricky Purcell, the receiver out of Florida, as kind of my, my sleeper. I really like, and this isn't necessarily a sleeper, but I think that from a production standpoint as a rookie, I think Jared Verse, the edge out of Florida State, I think he will have the most gaudy numbers of any defensive player in the first round draft. I really like him in double-digit sacks. I think he was a one-man wrecking crew a lot of times on the best defense in the NCAA last year, and so look for him to have he might be the third, fourth, fifth guy taken defensively in the first round, but he's going to have, I think, the most production.
So the last question I have, we talked about 2003, the year you were drafted. Remind us again, who was the number one pick that draft?
Carson Palmer.
What school did he go to?
USC.
True or false? He is the last good quarterback to come out of USC in the NFL.
The last good quarterback? Well, define good.
In the NFL on Sundays, Carson Palmer, very, very good quarterback, right? Was he the last good one that was playing in the NFL that was a Trojan? Because...
Well, I mean...
Sanchez, no.
Sanchez, you got Matt Castle.
Matt Leinart, no.
Matt Leinart.
Darnold, no. John David Booty, no.
Nice pull.
You like that?
Yeah.
Nice.
John David Booty from Louisiana, I think that kid was from.
Matt Barkley. Matt Barkley, no.
I really like Barkley coming out, and he disappointed me.
So my question now, guys, and I'd love to hear from both of you, is Caleb Williams going to be a good NFL QB? Is he worth minus 20,000 odds or wherever he is to be the first overall pick?
How cool would it be if the Bears took Jane Daniels or something, and just on a and changed the entire complexity of the draft? I think it would be fascinating.
I'm here for it.
Yeah, I'm here for it as well. Is he worth the number one draft pick? Yes. Will he be a Hall of Fame player? I don't think so.
Yeah, it's two different questions. I think it's a lock. The Bears are taking him, as much as I'd love to root for that chaos, and that would be grade A entertainment on Thursday. They're going to draft him. How well he's going to do, I think you've got to lean on the side of him being a really, 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 really good quarterback in this league. I think the floor is high for him. I don't see him being a complete bust, but I think he's a guy. I'm trying to think of a comp for him, like a Kirk Cousins type of guy who may not necessarily be elite, but who's going to have a really, 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 really strong career.
There's so many factors that play, right? You look at Andrew Luck, who was the last. Maybe not the last one, but one of the last surefire, quarterbacks coming in, and he was set up for success. He had a stable. He was replacing a legend. He had a stable, offensive system and coaching staff and ownership and things like that, and he had a really good career. But I don't know, injuries obviously, and maybe just wasn't in love with the process anymore, and ended up stepping down. Trevor Lawrence, who I thought was going to be a surefire Hall of Fame quarterback, right? But look at who he played for. Urban Meyer, who, right, but didn't even last 1 year. He's played for 4 different offensive coordinators already in the NFL, and has obviously dealt with some injuries, but has been on some bad teams. I think he's actually a pretty good quarterback, but people are starting to use the B word for him and bust because he hasn't been set up for success that much, right? So Caleb Williams is stepping into a really unique situation with Chicago, who have retooled around him and given him some weapons. Now, the coaching staff, will they stay around? How invested are they in this coaching staff? If they have a bad season, are they going to be fired? They were talking about firing him this year. So that could certainly impact them, right? I mean, this is they're basing their careers off of this draft pick. If they go 6-11 this year, are they going to be fired? And now he has to relearn a new system. That all factors in.
Yeah, nice to have Keenan Allen there in Chicago. I think that's going to help out a lot and an improving defense as well. So those
Big
are
time.
two important pieces for sure.
Big time, man. And we talked about it. Like, the Bears had a really good back end to the season. Like, they were making moves, and even Justin Fields was looking pretty good. I think he was hard done by personally, but we'll see how it all plays out. Ryan Hoag, drafted in 2003, former NFLer. Thanks for the insight on draft day. We appreciate it. And enjoy the draft, buddy.
Yeah, go Mr. Irrelevant to the Jets.
Yeah, huge shout out to Ryan for joining us to talk all things NFL draft. Tony, just a bit more than 24 hours to go until the draft. Have you seen the market movement on Chargers to draft a QB with their first pick? So per Joe Fortenbaugh, it opened at 100-1. Monday was 15-1. And then yesterday, 6-1.
I saw that. It was stunning. I can't imagine that happening. I'm almost like, I got a conspiracy theory for you here. Maybe okay. Jim Harbaugh is like wanting JJ McCarthy to go earlier. So he's like leaking some stuff out there that he might be taking JJ McCarthy because he wants someone else to jump up in front of him. One, so that he helps out his boy, JJ McCarthy. But two, so that he knows he's not drafting him because he doesn't need a quarterback. And so he wants someone else to fall to him at 5. What do you think about that for a conspiracy?
Yeah, that's pretty good. I don't see a world where the Chargers bail on Justin Herbert. Statistically, a borderline elite QB in the NFL. So I don't see that happening. So that makes sense with considering the steam on that market, just in the last couple days. I know McCarthy's name has been getting kicked around in every mock draft that comes out, every update, he seems to be going higher and higher. I hope there's not a world that the Chargers bail on Herbert. Like, he's not going to be on the market, is he? Like, that's crazy, right?
I agree it's crazy. Could you imagine, I really don't think this is going to happen, but let me just throw this crazy scenario out there. What if there's a Justin Herbert draft deal? Could you imagine that? A marquee quarterback getting traded during the draft? Like the Chargers, take McCarthy and then trade Herbert so that they can also get like one of those really good receivers in the first round still or something like that?
That's not bad. Like that would send ripples through the NFL landscape for sure. I'd love to see it. I'd love the chaos, but I can't see the Chargers doing anything with QB with that pick that they have. You went and saw, just as we wrap up here, a comedian of mutual interest last week, Tim Robinson in Austin, Texas. How was that?
It was a great show, Andrew. I think people that don't appreciate the show might not have liked it as much, but for like fans like you and I, it was great because they had a lot of the cast was there. I don't know, like 50, 60% of the cast. You got to see never before seen clips. So Tim was like, hey, we're going to show you clips that didn't make the prior episodes. And he did his whole Tim Robinson, overreacting. He's like, not that they're bad. That doesn't mean they're bad clips. But it was fun, man. It was cool. And we also got to see extended clips. Like, you don't realize when you're watching these shows, it's a 4-minute skit, but they cut out 3 minutes, and we got to see like the long version, and some of that stuff was hilarious too. So very, very glad that I went to go see Tim Robinson. And it's funny you bring him up because, when you asked me about the 6-1 odds on the Chargers drafting a quarterback, I wanted to give you are you sure about that? Tim Robinson.
Sure about that?
Meme reaction. Yeah, exactly.
Very envious you got to see him. I'm glad it was a good show. I know he's touring the country as we sit here now, so glad you had a good time. Don't forget, we are live every day, Monday through Friday, throughout the NHL and NBA playoffs, talking about the day's board, giving our best bets, et cetera, et cetera. So join us for that. And join us next week right here on The Huddle. What the hell are we even going to be talking about, Tony?
Baseball, I guess.
Yeah, just a little bit of baseball. All right, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we'll catch you all next week.